Well, this is a very important question, and the one thing I would say is that, you know, as scientists, uh, we get our ideas in many different places. Casual conversations, a glass of beer, reading a paper, it's all over the place. But what we do as scientists is we then take them and we have to be very precise in writing them down as mathematical uh, precise theories, and then we go test them. So my attitude is, I mean, I talk with people from all sorts of areas and all sorts of religious and scientific fields, and I get ideas wherever I can. And of course, I'm critical of the ideas. I'm critical of my own ideas. That's just the way science works. So get your ideas wherever you want to. What makes science different is that no matter where you get the ideas, now you've got to make them mathematically precise, you've got to make testable predictions, and then you've got to go out and test them. So that's where you get away from the woo. It doesn't matter where you get the ideas. The question is, what do you do with them and how rigorously do you frame them and test them once you've gotten them? And so that's the key point for me. Now, in panpsychism, is the reason why panpsychism and several other ideas have been starting to catch favor among cognitive neuroscientists and philosophers studying consciousness is that the physicalist approach, even though it seems to be well motivated by the standard reductionist framework in which space-time is fundamental, it started at the Big Bang and so forth, it seems to have all the right pedigree and the right framework. We've not been able to solve a single specific conscious experience. All the theories I gave you, orchestrated collapse of microtubules, integrated information theory, global workspace, if you ask these brilliant researchers, some of them are good friends of mine, just ask them, as I do sometimes on stage at conferences, great theory. So what specific experience can you tell me? What's the integrated information for the taste of vanilla or the smell of chocolate or whatever you want? And they can't give one. So the weird thing about it is that no physicalist theory of consciousness to date can explain even one specific conscious experience and say, this is the particular causal computational architecture, the right integrated information that must be the taste of vanilla. It could not be the taste of chocolate, and these are the exact reasons why. And if you made this particular change to the causal architecture, it would necessarily change it into the smell of a rose. There's just nothing like that on the table. And the hard thing is that it's not like we go, oh, well, but we can see how we could do it. We actually don't see how we could make that connection. How are you going to go from a causal computational architecture or a global, broadcasting to that must be the smell of a rose? How do you do that without a big leap? And so that's been a big problem. So this has then that was one thing that led me to begin to question the whole reductionist framework and to ask evolution. I mean, is that maybe space-time and matter and objects aren't the fundamental nature of reality, and evolution comes back and says they aren't. That's the wrong language. But in panpsychism now, what we have is a move to try to come at things at a different tack. The idea is if you can't boot up consciousness from space-time and matter, maybe you can somehow get consciousness coming in as a primary concept. Now, there's two ways that this is done. One is a monist way in which you say, okay, let's just start with consciousness as the only thing that there is. So we have a mathematical model of consciousness on its own terms, and we have to then show how space-time and matter emerge. Or you can have a more of a dualist kind of version where you say, let's say that there's physical stuff and its structure and also consciousness and have them somehow interact. The way panpsychists work is there are many versions of it, so I'll pick the one that I think is the most common version. It says, look, physics gives us these equations for how matter operates and how the world works, but it doesn't tell us what's inside the equations. It's just how things operate, but it doesn't tell us what the intrinsic nature of those things is. So maybe when we talk about the wave equation of an electron, maybe that that equation is just how something behaves, but it's not telling us what it is that behaves. What is an electron really, or what's inside the electron? And so panpsychist says, well, maybe there's some consciousness there. Maybe what's really going on inside electron is that there's some consciousness. And so the idea is that certain particles or certain combinations of particles, like maybe a neutron, which has 3 quarks in it, that might be conscious as well. So quarks are conscious or have consciousness. 3 quarks together can make a proton or a neutron, and those are conscious. But some combinations, like the things that go into making a rock, maybe that's the wrong kind of combination, and so a rock isn't conscious. And so the idea there is to it can be run in a dualist version. Sometimes they call it a neutral monist version. It's a little slippery. I tend to think of it somewhat as dualist, but I think others who are panpsychists might disagree. But the key point is that you take the laws of physics, and where you find an entity like an electron or a proton or something like that, you can put consciousness as the intrinsic thing that's actually being governed by those equations. Now, I myself am not a panpsychist. I don't think that approach, at least the one I just described, is radical enough. I think that there are good reasons on physics grounds to think that space-time itself is doomed, that space-time is not fundamental, that physics, even if they are not interested in consciousness per se, that physics itself has to look for something deeper than space-time. And this is work by Nima Arkani Hamed and other physicists who will give arguments from gravity and its interaction with quantum theory that say that there are no local observables in space-time. There's just it cannot be fundamental, and they're looking for deeper structures. They're finding things like an amplituhedron, associahedron, cosmological polytopes that are deeper structures that have no Hilbert spaces, so there's no quantum theory. They have no locality, no Lorentz invariance themselves, so they don't care about locality in space-time. But nevertheless, they have deep structures that can give rise to, for example, scattering amplitudes. They can predict scattering amplitudes, and they can be projected into space-time and show you how you get locality and unitarity. So the panpsychist views, I think, are too limited. They typically take the current space-time laws of physics as foundational and are trying to stick consciousness into the interstices there. And I think the physicists themselves are telling us, when they're going for things like the amplituhedron, look, there's a whole new level of logic and structure that we need to look for outside of space-time.
But the question I have is about conscious computers. So not only,
right.
Let's just skip Turing and say Chomsky's wrong, Turing's wrong. Can computers be conscious? If I don't see why not. According, at least if I put on my naive panpsychism hat, I don't know why not. Anything, just silicon and or Joseph's injunctions or whatever. So can they be conscious? And if they are, and if we are, somehow a virtual perception or perceiving entities, then who's to say that we're not simulated, as people have conjectured? And I'm sure that'll generate some follow-up questions from the audience. Yeah, so go ahead.
Yeah, great question. So there are a couple of frameworks to try to answer that. In a physicalist framework, so space-time and matter are fundamental, then the attitude is that, of course, machines can be conscious. The brain is a machine, and it's conscious. So we have a first-hand example. So John Searle at UC Berkeley has made that argument. And I think 99% of my colleagues in cognitive neuroscience say, of course, right? Brains are machines. They're carbon-based machines, not silicon-based machines, but they're machines, and they create consciousness, and we just have to work out how it's done. And they may be right. So in that case, yes. And if that's true, then I would say absolutely. If carbon-based machines can create consciousness, then certainly there's nothing against silicon-based machines. Now, I've argued, though, that there's principled reasons why you can't start with inanimate matter and boot up consciousness. So that I think it just can't be done, and that the whole Big Bang cosmology has to be rethought in that regard, and maybe start with consciousness being fundamental. Now, in the case of panpsychism, once again, the panpsychism has consciousness in some sense being fundamental. It's not derived from matter, but it's sort of the heart of matter. It's the to use Hawking's phrase, it's the fire inside the equations, right? That's what consciousness is. So in that sense, surely the right kinds of machines will have the right kinds of panpsychic consciousness. So that's a second framework in which you can think about it. The wrong kind of machine is a rock, right? It has the wrong kind of architecture, so the combinatorial way in which atoms combine to make a rock is not the right kind of combinatorics to have the rock have its own special consciousness of its own kind that's above and beyond all the consciousnesses of the particles. So that's the sort of the combination issue that comes up in panpsychism. Certain combinations will have consciousness associated with them, others will not, and so you have to be precise about that. And panpsychists are struggling to do that. In the framework that I'm working on, consciousness is fundamental. So it's not arising in any way from physics. Instead, physics in space-time is just the headset that certain consciousnesses use. So the metaphor I like to give is the Twitterverse, the vast social network of interacting agents in the Twitterverse. There's tens of millions of users, billions of tweets. There's no way that any Twitter user can grapple with the whole thing and read all the tweets. So we have visualization tools for vast social data that's overwhelming. We have visualization tools. And so in this view in which I'm proposing that ultimate reality is a vast social network of interacting consciousnesses like the Twitterverse, so that's the fundamental reality, then space-time is just one headset, one kind of data structure, one visualization tool that certain of the agents use to help them grok or interact with other agents. Now, once we if we think about it that way, I need to write down a mathematical model of the dynamics of these agents, of the headset, the mapping of the dynamics of conscious agents into the headset. Once I've done that, then we can try to reverse engineer that mapping and say, I mean, the headset is there to give me contact with certain conscious agents or to give me trends about what these conscious agents are doing, just like you get trends in Twitter. So the question would be, could I, once I know how this space-time headset works, can I open new portals in that headset to new consciousnesses? And would some of those portals, the technology needed to make those portals look like silicon and circuits? And my answer is probably. I mean, it's probably possible. Once we understand the headset, we can reverse engineer it. Right now, my headset, when I see your face, I've got a portal into your consciousness, fallible but genuine portal into your consciousness. So we know that this headset under this framework gives us portals into consciousness. Could we have a precise enough understanding of this headset and of its relationship to conscious agents that we could reverse engineer it? I think yes, and I think some of the technology may look like artificial intelligence, but we wouldn't be doing it in a reductionist framework. We're not starting with circuits and software that are unconscious and booting up consciousness. We're starting with consciousness and a headset that's been constructed by conscious agents. We're reverse engineering it to open up new portals to other conscious agents. So it's a completely different framework.